field trip because that was the first field trip I got to go on since starting high school. Secondly is I learned a lot on this field trip, such as the water quality of the Potomac River and a lot about the organisms that live within the river. Another part of the field trip that I really liked was when the captain let us drive the boat and when we got to catch all the fish. My second favorite experience from environmental science is when we got to create our jar ecosystem project, because me and my group became very close together when we'd go to the courtyard and choose which abiotic and biotic factors we'd like to incorporate within the jar. Lastly, my favorite experience from environmental science is when we got to learn about all the different case studies, specifically China and India, because I learned a lot about the factors that could increase or decrease the age-sex pyramid that can eventually affect the population of both countries. It has changed my everyday lifestyle because now I'm more aware of how much energy I use, and I try my best to conserve as much as I can, such as I use less water now, and I try to recycle, reuse, and reduce as much as I can. Okay, so my top 3 experiences this year would be the field trip to the Anacostia and Potomac River, because we learned a lot about water quality and how it affects us and how we affect it. And also it was a great background. It was a great background for the water quality IA, and yeah, I just really learned a lot on that field trip, and I really liked touching and like holding the fish and like using different like scales, like interacting with the wildlife. My experience this year was making and creating the jar ecosystem, because I really liked how it made my group closer together, and also it was great when we broke our jar and had to start over. But all jokes aside, it was honestly one of the best projects I have ever done, and I can't like think of anything else that would top it. And I really like digging up worms and finding crickets to put in the jar, and also putting in like glitter at the bottom because okay. So my third and last favorite memory of IB Environmental would be the trash IA, because I really learned a lot about how much trash I make, and it opened my eyes to realize how much like I waste, and also the like weighing in of like how much trash and like how much of like a specific category of trash really like was shocking to me, because I used a lot of like paper products that I didn't think I did use. So it was just really like cool to see how much trash I make. Okay. 2 ways that I want to help my community in the future would be next year I want to start like helping people join and know what like the environmental club is and like what the environmental class is, and to really make sure people are taking the class, and to recruit people and to educate people on topics that they probably don't know about. And also another thing I want to do is by creating a garden at my house, because we use a lot of like vegetables, and some of the vegetables that we do use we can just make them or we can grow them, but you know, we don't. And yeah, I also want to start composting, because you know it's great to compost, because then you use the food that you would throw away into making nutrients for your soil.
So one of the favorite things that I learned this year were about the Montreal Protocol. I learned that it takes more than one meeting for them to figure out how they're going to reduce their carbon intake. And it's a lot of hard work to minimize the amount, because different countries have to work together to see who has to minimize the carbon that their country uses. The Montreal Protocol was really hard to enforce because people weren't as considerate about it, so they didn't really care about following the rules. It was also hard to enforce because different countries had different things that they needed and different needs for the country. So in class, we did an assignment where we got a country and we had to come together as like the world would come together to like discuss who would minimize the amount of carbon that we take. And it was really hard because some countries were MEDCs and others were LADCs, and the LADCs couldn't change as much because they didn't have the money to like enforce things or like improve the way that they live. My second favorite thing that we did this year was the water quality IA, because I enjoyed going to the different locations to get the water and filling them up with the water bottles to find out like the differences of nitrate that there are in the different locations depending on the surrounding environment. Okay, so my third favorite thing that we did in the class in IB Environmental was that we got to watch TED Talks and learn about how geoengineering can really help the environment and reduce the possibility of having global warming. Geoengineering has its pros and cons for each strategy, and the first strategy is imitating a volcano, but the pros of that are that it actually cools down the environment, but the cons are that it pollutes the air and it can be bad for the environment. And the second strategy is putting mirrors in the atmosphere so that when the sun tries to get down to the earth and warm it, instead it reflects off of the mirrors, and so it goes back into the atmosphere, eventually cooling down the environment. So I think geoengineering is a somewhat good idea, but mainly bad, because the strategies aren't as realistic and are hard to like manipulate, such as the volcanoes. But at the same time, they're also good because they are better for the environment and they benefit the environment more than they don't benefit the environment. So yeah, that's what I think. Things I'm going to do to improve my community are to recycle more and to buy water bottles that I can reuse over and over and over again, so I'm not always buying school water bottles or buying plastic ones and throwing them out at the end of the day. The second thing I'm going to do is to create awareness to help people join and take the IB environmental class.
Go.
Okay, so my top 3 experiences from IB Environmental this year is the first one being the goldfish activity that we did right in the beginning of the year. And it was a really fun activity and a really good reference to learn about it was a good reference to learning about the tragedy of the commons. And it was really fun because at first we were all obviously trying to get as many goldfish as we can, but then we later realized that the more we took in the present, the less food we would have in the future. So it was a really good reference to learn about how the tragedy of the commons worked, and whenever we would forget about what it was, we would always have that activity to remember, and it would just come back of what it was. So my second favorite thing that we learned about in IB Environmental this year was of DDT, the pesticide. And it was really like interesting to see how, you know, at first like we used it to stop to lower malaria, since we were having an issue with that, and it did help, but then we later realized that over time the insects were it just kind of simply stopped working due to mutation, and the insects were getting used to it, so it stopped working. And it also caused, it harmed humans due to cancer, but at the same, but in Africa, they wanted to use malaria since they were having an issue with it, but it was difficult for the US to come to an agreement on whether or not we should let Africa have this pesticide. And did they get it? Oh, and Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring, which was dedicated to the use of the pesticide of DDT. So my third favorite thing that we learned about in IB Environmental, and what I believe was the most important lesson that we learned, was about global warming and climate change. Now, before taking IB Environmental, I heard a lot about on the news, especially about global warming is happening and there's climate change, and the Arctic is melting. So learning about it was definitely very helpful, and we learned about how the more greenhouse gases we have, the more climate change and global warming will happen, and how we affect and enhance greenhouse gases, the main one being carbon dioxide. and we learned about how we can take simple measures like doing carpooling, and that can help drastically, or well, not drastically, but it can help over time if we keep doing it, just like simple methods like that. So 2 environmental actions that I will take on the future is the first one being I will start using less waste. So for instance, I will start using washcloths instead of constantly using paper towels when drying my hands. I'll also use a reusable water bottle rather than a plastic one. Another environmental action that I will take in the future is, in my house right now we do have a garden, so I'll definitely make sure that we aren't using fertilizer on rainy days. And also, I remember Miss Clausen told us one time that in the fall when we have leaves, it's good to not rake them because the leaves will start to decay and that'll provide like organic nutrients to your soil. So that's a really good idea to do. And those are the actions that I will take in the future.
What we leave, what we take with us, no matter what, it's something we're part of. We learn to fly together side by side. I just hope the rest of my life will feel as good as mine.
Zoom, zoom, zoom. Zoom, zoom, zoom.
Recording, stupid!
Stargazing mega fast. Hit me like a cosmic blast. You could be in a technicolor world, putting me in overdrive. Speed of light, I'm so alive. Could you be my supernova girl? Interplanetary, interstellar, hydrostatic. There's no gravity between us. Our love is automatic. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Make my heart go boom. My supernova girl. Make my heart go boom. My supernova girl. Make my heart go boom. My supernova girl. Make my heart go boom. My supernova girl.
Okay.
Visions
You
of
look
your
like a
pretty
starfish.
face send me into hyperspace, caught up in a planetary world. Breathing in you give me air. I'm living off your solar flare.
So my first meaningful experience from IB Environmental this year was the first one being
Planetary, look. There's no gravity between us. Our love is automatic. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Make my heart go boom. My supernova girl. Zoom, zoom. Make my heart go boom. My supernova girl. Zoom, zoom. Make my heart go boom. My supernova girl. Zoom, zoom. Make my heart go boom. My supernova girl.
don't do this at home. That will start bleeding. Don't do this at home.
Don't do this at home.
The environment is dying and we need